The knock at midnight. When Leo was only 10 years old, he moved with his single father to a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Being new to the area, he didn't know anyone until he met Maya, a 12-year-old girl living just down the lane. Over the next couple of years, though they weren't exceptionally close, they naturally fell into the exact same circle of neighborhood friends. One chilly evening, just a week before Thanksgiving, Maya, her younger brother, and their mutual friend Toby were hanging out at Maya's house alone while her mother, a dedicated social worker, was away on a late-night shift. Through her job, Maya's mother had been assisting a distressed family whose severely unstable relative had recently been discharged from a mental facility. Unbeknownst to anyone, this unstable woman had tracked down the family's home address and her mother's work schedule. Late that night, a heavy, specific rhythm rattled the front door. Maya, recognizing the familiar pattern her mother always used to announce herself, unlocked the deadbolt without a second thought. Toby, who had sneaked over without permission, panicked at the thought of getting caught, slipped out the back window, and ran straight back to his house down the road without looking back. It wasn't her mother. The unstable woman forced her way inside. While Maya's little brother managed to slip out through the garage to a neighbor's house to alert the authorities, it was already too late. The intruder committed a brutal crime, leaving a permanent shadow over the town and a lingering trauma that Leo carried for the rest of his life, having been banned by his father from even attending his friend's funeral. Cold Trail in Aspen. This terrifying encounter happened about 15 years ago during a harsh winter in Aspen, Colorado. An elderly woman named Clara, whose husband had passed away a year prior, made a habit of volunteering at the local community archive downtown just to stay active and social. The archive locked its doors at 5 p.m., but on one particular evening, extra administrative duties kept everyone behind for a while, making it quite dark by the time Clara was ready to leave. A fellow volunteer offered her a ride home, but Clara politely declined, insisting that she needed the exercise to stay in shape. Her house was about a mile away, accessible through a lightly wooded, isolated valley trail. When she reached the halfway point, she noticed heavy footsteps crunching the snow far behind her. She was elderly and couldn't walk very fast, but the silhouette behind her was steadily closing the distance with a clear, malicious intent. Soon, the stranger was right behind her, matching her pace perfectly. Her gravel driveway was just 50 yards away, and she could see the porch lights she had intentionally left burning to make the house look occupied. Suddenly, a heavy, rough hand clamped down tightly onto her shoulder, and a raspy voice whispered directly against her neck, warning her not to turn around and to hand over her purse or he would cut her. Clara froze for a single split second, took one massive step forward to break his grip, spun around, and pulled a compact .38 revolver straight out of her purse. She fired a single shot directly into the man's neck. The assailant survived but spent the next 5 years in a secure prison hospital before dying of complications. To her final days, Clara only ever regretted one thing, that she had pulled the trigger just a moment too soon. The Tinted SUV. Growing up on a sprawling rural property on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, 10-year-old Owen was often left in the care of his older sister, Chloe, who was 7 years his senior. Chloe had a heavy smoking habit that she desperately hid from their parents, which meant she frequently slipped outside to the very edge of the gravel driveway, with Owen constantly tagging along just to pester her. One foggy afternoon, Chloe noticed a white SUV with pitch-black tinted windows and a heavy-duty mountain bike rack sitting completely motionless at the edge of the road. The moment they headed back inside, the vehicle shifted into reverse, rolled down to an empty church parking lot, and waited patiently for her next trip outside. This bizarre, predatory routine repeated for days, with Owen watching from the front window as the unknown driver stared relentlessly at his sister. Their father, a local county sheriff's deputy, logged a formal complaint, but the phantom vehicle always vanished just before patrol cars arrived. Months passed with absolute silence until, nearly a year later, the white SUV suddenly reappeared at the edge of the driveway. Fed up and furious, Chloe ordered Owen to wait under the carport while she marched down the driveway to confront the driver. But halfway down the path, an overwhelming primal terror paralyzed her, and she later remarked feeling a certain intuition that if she took another step, she would be dead. She spun around and sprinted back inside. A few nights later, while the family car was away at a repair shop, the SUV crept up to the property line again. Owen ran inside to alert his father, who grabbed his service weapon and marched down the driveway. Spotting an armed lawman approaching, the driver slammed on the gas and peeled out onto the nearby highway. As it sped away under the streetlights, their father caught a chilling detail. The rear license plate had been completely covered in thick black duct tape. They never saw it again. 4. The basement closet. Following his parents' bitter separation, 4-year-old Liam moved with his mother into a cozy, ground-floor garden apartment in Phoenix, Arizona. Though he had his own bedroom at the end of the hallway, he preferred sleeping in his mother's bed whenever he stayed with her. It was the height of a scorching summer, so his mother kept the master bedroom window wide open above the headboard to catch the desert breeze. In the dead of night, Liam suddenly woke up and noticed their cat sitting frozen in the doorframe, staring intently into the dark hallway and letting out a strange, low meow. Liam turned and spent 3 or 4 seconds nudging his mother awake. The moment she opened her eyes, they both looked back toward the doorway just in time to see a tall, unknown man standing by the open door, silently making his way out of the bedroom. Moving with pure maternal adrenaline, his mother scooped Liam up and literally hurled him straight through the open window screen onto the grass outside, quickly scrambling out after him as they both began screaming for help until a neighbor dialed 911. The police arrived within minutes but found no signs of forced entry, noting only that the front door was completely unlocked, leading them to believe the intruder had simply walked out. His mother swore up and down that she had bolted and chained the door before bed. The true horror unraveled a week later when his mother was deep cleaning the kitchen and opened up the central utility closet where the water heater was kept. Inside, she discovered a dirty legal pad filled with handwritten names, detailed schedules, hand-drawn sketches of them sleeping, a pair of heavy gloves, and candy wrappers. The intruder hadn't broken in that night. He had been living inside their utility closet for weeks, waiting for them to fall asleep. Echoes in the dark. Julian lived in a historic, sprawling estate in Savannah, Georgia, which featured a massive, damp concrete basement divided into 2 separate wings by a heavy iron door. One side served as an old storage utility space, while the inner room housed the laundry appliances. Late one evening, Julian was finishing up a load of laundry when the primary overhead bulb in the outer storage wing suddenly popped and died, plunging that side of the basement into total, oppressive darkness. The exit stairs leading back up to the main house were on the far side of that pitch-black room, meaning he had no choice but to walk through the heavy dark to escape. Steeling his nerves, Julian stepped out of the laundry room and began navigating his way across the concrete floor. Halfway through the darkness, a loud, raspy, echoing cackle erupted right against the back of his neck. It sounded exactly like a manic, distorted witch's laugh, heavy and hoarse as if worn down by decades of heavy smoking, clear as day right behind him. Without a single second of hesitation, Julian bolted for the stairs in absolute terror, slamming the cellar door shut behind him. He waited upstairs in silence until his father returned home later that night to help change the fixture. He never heard the sound again and never breathed a word of it to his family, but to this day, he refuses to enter that basement without a flashlight. 6. The Midnight Study Session. Elena was a 24-year-old private academic tutor living in a compact, one-room studio apartment in downtown Seattle, Washington. One stormy winter evening, her college prep session with a high school student ran exceptionally late, and by the time they finished, the final transit buses had completely stopped running for the night. Being a long way from his family's home, The boy desperately begged Elena if he could just crash on her floor overnight and catch the very first morning train. Elena was highly reluctant, knowing that hosting a teenage male student overnight wasn't a great idea, but his pleading eventually wore her down. She relented, setting up a heavy sleeping bag on the hardwood floor for him while she retired to her own bed. They turned off the lights and eventually fell asleep. At exactly 2 a.m., the student frantically shook Elena awake, claiming he was starving and insisting they leave the apartment immediately to go find a diner. Disoriented and deeply annoyed, Elena told him to check the kitchen for instant ramen, but the boy grew bizarrely aggressive, rejecting the food at home and demanding they walk to a 24-hour place just down the road. To avoid a loud confrontation, Elena gave in, grabbed her coat, and stepped out into the street with him. The moment the apartment door clicked shut behind them, the student grabbed her arm, his face completely pale. He confessed that he wasn't hungry at all, but rather, his phone had rolled under her bed, and when he lay down on the floor to reach for it, he looked up and saw a homeless man lying directly underneath a mattress, silently staring back at him. Emergency services raided the room and discovered the man had been secretly nesting under her bed for over 2 months. Canyon ambush. Marcus, a former military veteran, was driving a lonely 2-lane desert shortcut from 29 Palms, California, toward Albuquerque, New Mexico. The route was an endless stretch of total nothingness, cutting through a desolate high desert mountain range far below sea level. Navigating a sharp, narrow canyon curve surrounded by tall, dense brush on both sides of the asphalt, Marcus suddenly spotted a bizarre scene completely blocking both lanes ahead. A red sedan was parked sideways across the tarmac, a suitcase sat wide open with clothes scattered everywhere, and 2 figures, a man and a woman, were lying face down in the middle of the road, completely motionless as if a horrific accident had just occurred. Marcus braked, stopping about 100 feet back, but instantly, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. His tactical training flared. The scene looked entirely artificial, perfectly staged to force an unsuspecting traveler to step out of their vehicle, a classic desert ambush layout. Without taking his eyes off the road, Marcus reached under his seat, drew his 9mm pistol, and chambered around. Dropping the car into first gear, he floored the gas pedal, choosing a tight, aggressive line to weave past the sedan and the bodies without hitting them. As his vehicle roars past, he glanced in the rearview mirror and watched in horror as the 2 dead bodies instantly sprang to their knees, and nearly 20 armed bandits emerged from the tall brush on either side of the road. Marcus didn't let off the throttle until he hit the interstate highway miles away, knowing how close he came to vanishing completely. 8. The Whispers of the River. A group of close friends were night fishing along a dense, heavily wooded bank of the James River in Virginia. With a roaring campfire going, a few beers open, and the usual idle chatter filling the air, the relaxed atmosphere was shattered when a sudden, heavy silence dropped over the woods. Every single person stopped talking at once, struck by an overwhelming, uneasy feeling of being watched by something or someone from the pitch-black opposite bank of the river. As some of the guys tried to laugh off the tension with nervous, macho jokes, a horrific, blood-curdling sound tore through the night from across the water, freezing everyone in their tracks. It sounded like a wild, non-human throat letting out a guttural, agonizing shriek, devoid of words, just pure, violent torment that made every hair on their bodies tingle. Before anyone could speak, a second scream echoed, louder and with even more force than the first. Terrified, the group bolted to their trucks parked a few yards away, retrieving hunting rifles and flashlights. They stood by the bank, tracking their beams across the rushing river, waiting for a sign of movement reflecting off the rocks. Suddenly, a third scream shattered the silence, but this time, it was on their side of the river, bursting from the thick bushes just a single yard behind where they stood. Realizing the entity had crossed the water silently in the dark, the friends abandoned their fishing gear, scrambled into their trucks, and floored it away into the night as a final, mocking shriek echoed from the tree line. 9. The answered line. On a lively Friday evening, Gavin was rushing around his house, getting ready to catch a ride with his friend to a major hockey game downtown. Because they were running late, he threw his jacket on and bolted out the door, completely failing to realize that his smartphone was missing from his pocket. Halfway through the drive, Gavin grew anxious that he might have dropped his device in the stadium parking lot or left it somewhere vulnerable. During the first intermission of the game, he borrowed his friend's phone, walked out to a quiet corridor, and dialed his own number, hoping a family member back home would pick up. After 3 heavy rings, the call suddenly connected, but the line remained completely silent. Gavin spoke up quickly, yelling into the phone that he was just checking if he had left his phone on the kitchen counter, but there was no reply, only the sound of rhythmic, heavy breathing on the other end. Assuming his younger brother was just playing a silent prank on him, Gavin got annoyed and hung up. When Gavin returned home late that night, the house was completely dark and his parents' cars were missing. He called his mother's cell, and she informed him that they had taken his little brother out for dinner and a live park concert hours ago, and wouldn't be back for another half hour. A wave of cold dread hit Gavin's stomach as he realized that if his entire family had been out since before the hockey game, someone else had answered his phone inside the empty house. Just then, he heard the back door to the house click open and close. He instantly bolted out the front door to a neighbor's house to call the police, later learning that an intruder had slipped in through an unsecured door, holding his phone in the dark. The closet companion. Arthur, a veteran of foreign conflicts, lived in a rural woodland home in Montana next door to a family with a deeply troubled 19-year-old son named Calvin. Calvin exhibited unsettling, twisted behavior. He was obsessively fixated on violent movies, asked invasive questions about Arthur's military past, and actively harmed local stray animals. Most concerning of all, Calvin repeatedly tried to corner Arthur's 7-year-old daughter, Lily, talking to her over the fence and calling the house directly. After a furious confrontation where Arthur warned Calvin's parents to keep their son away permanently, things took a sinister turn. Little Lily began crying at night, insisting that a shadow monster was living inside her bedroom closet and stepping out to watch her sleep, disappearing only when the sun came up. Arthur and his wife dismissed it as typical childhood imagination and nightmares. Weeks later, Arthur's wife and daughter left town for an overnight family visit, leaving Arthur home alone. He eventually fell asleep on the living room sofa downstairs. At exactly 2 a.m., his phone rang. It was the next-door neighbor panicked, stating that Calvin was missing from his room and his window was open. The neighbor added that they noticed Arthur was awake because his upstairs lights were on. Arthur's blood turned to ice. He had been dead asleep downstairs, and no lights should be on. He hung up, grabbed his shotgun from the rack, and stepped outside. Looking up at his daughter's second-story window, he saw the lights blazing and a distinct silhouette pacing back and forth inside. Police units arrived and stormed the room, arresting Calvin. Inside Lily's closet, they discovered a makeshift living space complete with blankets and food wrappers. Calvin had broken in days prior, hiding inside the child's closet for hours every single night just to watch her sleep in the moonlight.